Okay. Hi, I'm Mike Doran. I am the director of the Middle East Center at the Hudson Institute. And I am honored today to be joined by David Albright. He is the founder and the head of the Institute for Science and International Security. And David, you are widely considered to be the country, maybe the world's foremost expert on secret nuclear weapons programs. I mean, you are certainly the guy that I look to tell me what's really going on when everyone is hurling accusations about the Iranian nuclear program. So welcome, and thanks for coming to help us understand what's going on. Let me start by just asking you to give us a 30,000-foot overview of the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program. How would you assess it from what you know now?
Well, the bombing was very effective, and I would say the major nuclear programs that Iran has involving centrifuges, some what we'd call the Plutonium pathway to the bomb are destroyed, and the weaponization part, where the part where you make the nuclear weapon itself, has been heavily damaged, and that in a sense is we see it in the public as these, I don't know what it is now, 15 or more scientists who were killed by Israel, all linked to the nuclear weaponization process. And so you have a program that's been heavily damaged. Now, that doesn't mean everything was destroyed, and you know, there are questions of what remains involved with the centrifuge program and the weaponization. I think the plutonium pathway destruction was pretty total. It involved a reactor and a heavy water production plant. And that, I would say, that wasn't the most important thing to destroy. The centrifuge program and the weaponization is critical. Now, what wasn't destroyed or targeted was their nuclear power program. They have a very large nuclear power reactor called Bushehr 1. That was exempted. Israel made a deal with the Russians who worked there. It is a Russian-supplied reactor, and there's Russians building Bushehr 2 and 3. And so Iran's, what I would call its necessary nuclear program wasn't touched. Necessary
meaning if it was truly a civil nuclear program, this would be acceptable in that.
That's right. Yeah. And it makes electricity. The enriched uranium comes from Russia. Iran cannot possibly make enough enriched uranium for Bushehr 1, let alone Bushehr 2 and 3. And so they just buy it internationally at competitive rates. So, and that was exempted, and everyone agrees that program can be lived with.
But you kind of said this, and let me just make sure I understood correctly. I have always been under the impression that the plutonium pathway to an Iranian nuclear weapon was secondary in the Iranian program, that they were really concentrating on the uranium pathway. Do I have that right?
In the weapons side, yes. In fact, it's always been this mystery of why they were building, it used to be called the Iraq reactor, 40 megawatt thermal reactor, that was designed in a way that it could make pretty good weapon grade plutonium. And it was cooled and moderated by heavy water, and they built a heavy water production plant. And so, and it was a major target of this Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, to turn it into a reactor that's proliferation proof. And I think Israel bombed it because Iran had been veering off that pathway of making it proliferation proof and was taking steps. And so they then decided to basically try to destroy the core and then cripple the heavy water production plant.
They were veering off that pathway. This is the issue of the calandria.
Yes.
So a calandria is a key component of the reactor, which allows it to create weapon grade. I'm just explaining to make sure that I understand, but also that everybody else is following you. To make weapon grade plutonium, the JCPOA required the substitute of the calandria with a different design that wouldn't allow the creation of weapon-grade plutonium. But the head of the Iranian Atomic Energy Association went on TV and said, "Well, we tricked the Westerners because we have a spare calandria that can do the job in storage." and we're going to stick it back. Is that what you mean when you
Yeah,
say?
that's right.
Yeah.
And there's no proof that they were planning to use that in a bomb program. And when there are these documents that were seized by Israel in 2018 that cover the crash nuclear weapons program of the early 2000s, and in it there's almost nothing on plutonium. It's really focused on a weapon grade uranium bomb gained through an enrichment program. And so it's always been a bit of an anomaly or mystery. Why were they doing this? And in some of their early public statements, they would say, well, we wanted to have the uranium pathway and the plutonium pathway, or let me put it this way, they developed the plutonium pathway and the uranium pathway, and these are their words. And we thought one wouldn't work. And this is in 2003. Head of the Atomic Energy Organization says that we were surprised both worked. And so, but in the weapons program, the plutonium one was not emphasized in terms of designing a nuclear weapon.
There's a lot of redundancy in their program, though. No.
Yeah, and I think they had lots of funds, and the Atomic Energy Organization saw the plutonium pathway as having benefits and civil applications, and so I think they really pursued that pathway much more than the weaponeers.
Okay, so on the uranium and weaponization side, there are the three major sites: Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan. And I read you put out a report that I would recommend to everyone. Your initial assessment, and it's that they did a pretty good job, to the extent that you can tell, because there are underground facilities, particularly in Natanz and Fordo, and you can't know for sure what happened under the ground. But from what you can tell, you think the destruction was pretty severe.
Yeah, and if you start with the above ground, I mean, Isfahan has many buildings, and the Israelis and then the United States were targeting Iran's ability to produce what we call the feed gas of a centrifuge program. You take natural uranium, comes out of a mine, turned into something called yellow cake, and then you process that into uranium hexafluoride. The U.S. actually destroyed this pretty substantial building pretty thoroughly that would make that. And so in that sense, you deny Iran the ability to enrich uranium in the future beyond what it already has in supply. The Israelis destroyed a facility that had been controversial for several years that would take enriched uranium and hexafluoride. It was a facility to do all this, to go from uranium hexafluoride through your enriched uranium metal. Iran had only put in the line that in the middle, in a sense, that goes from uranium tetrafluoride to enriched uranium metal. And they had tested it with 20%, and then it just laid idle for the last several years. And so the view was so if they were going to break out, that would be used in a bomb program to make weapon grade uranium metal. And so that was taken out.
Let me just, I'll run everyone through, this is a statement in the form of a question. I'll just run through the stages of going from mining to bomb. You'll correct me if I get anything wrong, but you did some of them for us already. You take the ore out of the ground, then you take the ore and you turn it into yellow cake through some kind of chemical process. The yellow cake you then turn into a gas, and you feed the gas into the centrifuges, and they then create, the centrifuges then enrich it. They isolate the isotope that can be used in a bomb. Then you take your enriched uranium, and then you have to turn it into the metal.
That's right, for a bomb program.
For a bomb. And so at Isfahan, we had two of those processes. We had turning it from yellow cake into gas, but then on the other end, taking the enriched uranium and turning it into a metal, which you can mold and put into a warhead.
That's right.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And what you're telling me is that they had done the initial. They didn't want to show their hand and say they were getting ready to. They were doing experiments to turn it into a metal with enriched uranium that was not enriched to weapon grade, so that when it came time to do it, they would know how to do it properly.
And that's the interpretation. And the fact that it didn't operate it added confirmation to that assessment. And they also, if you enrich uranium, if it's civil, you can then take it, turn it into an oxide and make it into fuel. And they have facilities at Isfahan to do that, mostly not finished or used, but except for fuel for a research reactor. And that building was also struck because it's, in the past, it's where we could chart 85% of the 20% and 60% stocks were kept. So they were brought from the enrichment plants to this facility at Isfahan, which was a fuel fabrication plant, and just stored. They weren't used very much to make fuel, if at all, because the stocks were so large. And that facility was bombed twice.
Why did this is a little technical footnote, but I didn't understand. You know, the Americans came in and they dropped the massive ordnance penetrators on Fordo, but they also sent Tomahawk missiles against, I think it was Isfahan, if not mistaken. Why wouldn't the Israelis have been able to hit? Why did they need the Americans to do that with the Tomahawk missiles?
I think my view was not to involve the Americans, but the Americans could do it much better. I mean, let me just jump to Fordo. Fordo is deeply buried. It came out of the weapons program of the early 2000s. It was the facility that the bomb weaponeers wanted to make weapon-grade uranium. It was going to get help from enriched uranium from Natanz. And so they would start with 5% at Fordo or so, and then run it up to weapon-grade uranium and using these old IR-1 centrifuges. When the program halted in 2003, but for the program to build the Al Ghadir project continued. And then they got caught, and then they classified.
Al Ghadir is Fordo, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so, and you can. There's all kinds of schematics in the archive, and we were able to kind of take the schematics of the tunnel.
I highly recommend that to everyone. That's one of the nicest things about your report. You map, you project the picture of the topography. Again, over that you overlay the schematics of from the Ahmad program, and so you get a sense of what this thing probably looks like.
And what we did is you need 3 points. So we had 2 tunnel entrances, and we needed a third point, and that was the ventilation shaft of the site. And it's marked on the schematics, and then we could look at old satellite imagery from 2009, and find the ventilation shaft construction.
Yeah.
And we felt that Israel could have taken out that ventilation shaft. What we didn't understand at the time was that this whole MOP was designed with full knowledge of that ventilation shaft and another one. And so I can remember having arguments, in fact, where they'd say, well, but a MOP can't go through more than whatever, 30, 40 meters of
we know this now
from
but
there's a ventilation shaft
from
space.
From the briefing that General Kane gave us. We know now that this is I didn't know that either.
It's very American. I mean, we were thinking Israel could do it with their weaponry, and they come in with 5, 6 MOPs, one to blow off the cover. Which I must confess, I mean, I looking back, I mean, all our chatter on here's a ventilation shaft, here's immense vulnerability of the plant, actually led Iran to put that cap on, and because I think their view was that it was invincible,
right?
And we were sort of poking little holes at that, and but it's very American to build a weapon system as big as that to go through ventilation shafts
to do that particular thing,
and so it's.
I
would expect the place is really destroyed, and when we look at satellite image over the last week since it's destroyed. They're doing things like, putting caps back on where the MOPs went in. There's 6 holes. They were excavating and then putting basically caps. We thought they had, when they moved in cranes to this area, that maybe they were going to try to drop something down.
Right.
But it doesn't look like that. It looks like they may have taken some readings, but that they just wanted to cap it, and then they've cleared out a tunnel entrance. We don't know if anything's gone in yet, but it just seems like what they're trying to do is figure out what just happened to them, and they're having a hard time figuring out the damage done. But
when I look at
how to access the site to and determine that, because one of the unfortunate properties of uranium hexafluoride is that when it's exposed to water, it produces hydrofluoric acid. And the fluorine by itself is very reactive, and so when it touches water, so it's a very dangerous environment to walk in if the explosions dispersed the enriched uranium.
So encapsulation is probably the smartest thing to do then.
Yeah.
But why do you think they hit the Isfahan with the Tomahawk missiles? Because wouldn't the Israeli capabilities be equal to that?
Well, I think we were surprised that we would see buildings sort of all around the uranium conversion facility hit, and not that one. But we were very surprised that Fordo wasn't hit. And day after day would go by and it wasn't hit, and they could make it inoperative at least. And they didn't do it. So I can't help but think that they felt that the United States could do a much better job, and they wanted to kind of lure the United States in to do the job.
To do it, yeah.
And they knew about the MOP, and they knew that they're
so it was all planned with the.
I think, but I'm not sure the U.S. had decided. I don't know if it really was planned or if it was just Israel putting pressure on them to step in and do a much better job. And when you look at the damage from the cruise missiles, it is pretty remarkable compared to what Israel was doing in terms of being able to just destroy the conversion facility and just do it in one whack, in a sense. And Israel was coming back sometimes twice to take out some of the buildings not even as large as the conversion facility. And neither side could hit the tunnel complex. There was a tunnel complex that Isfahan that was built back in about 2005, and it was built to use in case of a military threat. That's what they declared to the International Atomic Energy back then. And at that time, it was essentially empty. But it turns out that the United States and Israel cannot destroy that site, and so that becomes a place where all they could do is block the tunnel entrances, and they did that. And when we looked a couple days ago, Iran had not tried to unblock the tunnel entrances.
Why couldn't the MOP destroy that facility?
It just because it can't really penetrate that much of a mountain. I mean, it's very difficult for it to penetrate as deep as the hulls would be. You can get the tunnel entrances, and they would have had the design. I mean, they would have known from all these years exactly what the design was.
Do you have any idea what's in those tunnels now?
No, and the only thing everyone's working from is a statement made to the, I think to Director General Grossi of the IAEA that from a senior official that said we plan to move our stocks and we plan to protect them, but Iran was surprised. I mean, Israel did catch them by surprise, and it's an open question of how much they moved and how much was destroyed. And it could have been destroyed in Fordo. There was material in the underground site at Natanz. There was a little bit at the pilot plant above ground at Natanz. There was could have been more, quite a bit at some of the buildings hit at Isfahan. And it's in three categories essentially. I mean, it's a 2 to 5% enriched, 20% enriched, and 60% enriched. And the 20% enriched stock was way down because they, doing something that actually was alarming people, was taking the 20% starting in December and then enriching it up to 60% as fast as they could. And so it looked like they were preparing to break out and trying to further reduce the time they need to make weapon-grade uranium.
Let me ask you about this facility that everyone calls Pickaxe Mountain. As far as I can tell from the reports, neither the Israelis nor the Americans hit it. So first of all, can you tell us what it is? And if they didn't hit it, why do you think they didn't hit it?
Well, in about 2020, Israel blew up a major nuclear facility at Natanz. It was almost finished, and its purpose was to assemble advanced gas centrifuges and be able to assemble several, up to 8,000 a year. And they couldn't make that many, but still they could make a couple thousand a year. And so it was a major investment, and they with one blast destroyed it. And Iran's reaction was, okay, now we're going to put it under a mountain. And they have been already had a tunnel complex at this Pickaxe Mountain or in a peak next to it and under that peak. And they said, we're going to now build this. We'll be done in a year or two. They're just now finishing, we think. So they're way behind. And you could see problems. I mean, there'd be water running out of tunnel entrances. It looked like they were really slowed down. And that it was so large underneath, at least in our estimate, but also in the Israeli estimate, that there was a suspicion that it would have an assembly facility for centrifuges, but also would be having a small enrichment plant. And you assemble in one part of the underground facility, you install them, in a sense, in the next hall. And so that was a common assessment. And I think the only thing I've heard beyond what the common assessment is that it wasn't hit was Israel did something to it to damage it, but we don't know what it is. This came out of people reporting out of Israel. So we really don't know. And we don't know really what's in it. I mean, we never saw equipment being taken in, but doesn't mean it didn't happen. But it looked like at best they could have started something before it was finally finished. If you look at it, it looks possibly like they're finishing now, but mostly in the sense they're not doing any more tunneling. You don't see the kind of things that we call lining the tunnels that Iranians do in a particular way, and we don't see the kind of activity you would associate with an operational plant. But it could be a store place.
So your best assessment is that it really isn't online yet. Is that the?
Yeah, but we don't know what could be stored there, and we don't really know. I mean, in the Washington debate, it's very easy to predicate everything on an if. They since they said they were going to protect the stocks, they must have done that.
Yeah.
And you have people like President Trump saying, no, the Iranians thought Fordo was invincible. They put everything there, and now it's obliterated or destroyed or inaccessible. And I think we just don't know. And ultimately, and I think where I come out is we've got to hedge our bets. And that we need to have assurance that these stocks are not going to come back and really haunt us a year or two from now.
Right.
And so, I think I share the assessment that they're not rushing to build nuclear weapons. I don't think they've even made the decision to make nuclear weapons as a result of this. I mean, sure, there's going to be statements by people that, let's go for it, and from the Iranian side, but actually going to build nuclear weapons, given what how it commands the skies and is so penetrated that it's those institutions, they may see it as far too risky, and they need to kind of defend themselves, protect assets, hide, and keep a low profile.
I'm going to come back to you on that issue. I want to stay for a second on this Pickaxe Mountain, because I want to make sure I understand it. When the last report of the IAEA, they censored the Iranians and said they were not in compliance with their NPT obligations. And in reaction, the Iranians said, they attacked the IAEA and they said, we're going to build a new enrichment facility.
Build a new one.
Yeah.
And ready to install centrifuges.
So underground, yeah.
Or wonder why they get bombed. I mean, this is their modus operandi to cause panic in the minds of Israelis that you don't want to wait to strike them. And
was the common assumption that the facility that they were referring to, that the new secure facility they were going to build, was Pickaxe Mountain, or is it some other one?
No, it was Pickaxe Mountain. But then Grossi came out and said that the Iranians said it's at Isfahan. But we don't know what that means. I mean, it's not at the main site. We don't know. Is it in the mountain complex? It doesn't. Maybe, but it's now blocked. It can't get into it, or is it in another building? Israel would probably know where it is, and if it is above ground, it very well could have been bombed. But it fed this idea, and it's a legitimate idea, that they said they were getting ready to install centrifuges there. Well, that means they've made those centrifuges, or you have to assume that. And they've been deploying thousands of centrifuges a year at the Natanz underground site. It's up to about, I don't know what it is, 17,000 now. And so they very well could have made a couple thousand that were not deployed at Fordo or Natanz, and that's a question: where are they?
Okay, and this is what you call in your report the residual capabilities or residuals. And there are two components to that. There's the possibility of centrifuges that have been manufactured and stored and not put online yet. And there's a possibility that some percentage of the 60% enriched uranium is still available to the.
That's right.
They moved it out of Fordo or wherever, and they are storing it somewhere.
Yeah.
So in your mind, I'm asking a question here. In your mind, the most dangerous scenario for us moving forward with respect to the Iranians is that they'll take that residual uranium and those centrifuges and then enrich it to 90% for a bomb.
That's right. Make a very small enrichment plant.
Yeah.
I don't think they would do it it's not imminent by any means, but wait a year, 2 years, and the pressure goes down, their air defenses are back up. They get help from Russia on more sophisticated air defenses, and then they've kept the international inspectors out, and then they make a move, and so yeah, that to me is a central.
As somebody who's concerned with non-proliferation, that's your number one scenario of concern?
Yeah, I think so.
Are there other scenarios that are worrying you as well?
Well, but we have to add in, I mean, their ability to make the bomb was severely hurt, and so they have to, and that's why I also don't think it's so imminent of a threat, is that they have to kind of reconstitute their capabilities, and they've lost some senior personnel, top scientists. They've lost facilities. They have to figure out how they could make these facilities. It's tangible objects that are needed to make a nuclear weapon. How can they put them someplace and assemble them without being detected?
Mm-hmm.
The Mossad has put out a kind of a flyer electronically and probably in paper all through Iran. You come to us, and here's the email address, and we'll give you a nice reward.
And they've shown that they have the ability to kill people too. So if you want to stay off the target list, it's probably better to.
No, and they issued a statement that if you work on this program, and I think they mean a secret centrifuge program, a weaponization program, they'll kill you. So I mean, and they I know they were texting or calling. I don't know what. I guess you don't call anyone anymore, but text, email scientists all over Iran threatening their lives, and so I think Iran would have a real problem reconstituting both an enrichment program and a nuclear weaponization program, and so I think they'll bide their time.
How hard will it be?
Well, they'll try to bide their time. I mean, the challenge is what the U.S. does, but they'll try to bide their time.
Aside from the fact that nuclear scientists in Iran are scared, just in terms of know-how, capability, and so on, how seriously have the Israelis set back the weaponization program by killing these scientists? Can they be, in terms of the human capital, can they be replaced easily?
I think, yeah. I mean, what they're doing, and it's a very hard statement, but I mean, on the weaponization is they try to destroy the hardware, and there are things they've hit we don't know about yet.
Yeah.
I mean, they hit over 200 targets, and we're talking about 5 or 6, and then you try to destroy the software, and they've been using cyber methods to go after some of that, and other methods, and then you kill the software developers. and you can see in some of the people killed, they're in the physics department. They're working. You can see from their publications they were developing very sophisticated codes that could have application in the weapons program. And so I think Israel's just trying to systematically destroy their capabilities. And yes, people can be replaced, but it takes time. And you have this. Also, you have this. There were several scientists killed back in 2010, 2012.
Right.
They had students because Iran has a very robust military industry, military universities that train people in physics and engineering for placement in the military industries, including the nuclear. And they killed some of their students that trained by these people that had been killed, and then they killed some of the students. So it's they're.
So you have to have a lot of fortitude if you want to become a Iranian
nuclear weapons
expert right now.
No, that's right. But how long did they set him back? I mean, people are a little shocked on this assessment, and maybe it's not our final one, but we were thinking that they needed about 6 months to finish the process and build a bomb. But it was that time frame was shrinking over the last several months. We hadn't attached a new date. Some have been talking about 3 months, 4 months to do all the things they needed to make the bomb itself. I think we're thinking it's more like a year now. But I think the Israelis are trying to say that if you look at everything, the damage to the enrichment program, the damage to the weaponization, the general damage to just intellectual capabilities, that it's several years before they could really get everything together to make a bomb. But this is it's hard to disagree. It's hard to agree too. But they have a point that I'm looking at each little component part of it and making estimates, but you have to look at it
as a holistic
way, and the Iranians really have to worry about detection, and they know that the bombings can start and the killings will probably continue. I mean, I don't see why Mossad would stop its activities, and it is just a ceasefire. There's no peace treaty. Iran is still resisting, realizing, from my view, that it's been defeated on this issue.
Okay, let's. I'll get to the ceasefire in a second, but let me ask you to do something that's unusual for you. Imagine that you are the advisor to Ali Khamenei, and you want to tell him how to save as much as possible. You want to have the nucleus of the program saved, and you want to move toward a nuclear weapon as quickly as possible. What would you tell him to do?
I don't know. What's the phrase? Go to the ground. Just really hide out, and wait it out, and see where things are 6 months from now. Evaluate. Wait a year. And just
for the moment,
wait.
just buy time.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't. You would advise him to just continue to stiff arm the IAEA. Don't let them come in and look at anything, and just evaluate what you've got. And
that's different. I mean, I may say, okay, IAEA, come in and inspect the stocks. But just limit what they can look at. But you can't take them with you.
Yeah.
And 300 kilograms is under Fordo Mountain.
Yeah, have fun.
Have fun.
Yeah, go. You go excavate it. We don't know how to do it.
But in fact, 200 kilograms is hidden away.
Right.
Secretly. So again, that's a very big if. But that's what I would be looking for.
So you can play hide the ball with the IAEA, and they're very good at that. That's a national sport for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you're declaring to have it, and that's what they did in 2003 and 4. Was, we were so happy. We found first to identify publicly the Natanz enrichment plant, and it took a lot of work for the institute to do that, and we were so proud. And yet we fell for the Iranian deception. We didn't even look for the Al Ghadir project. And then even when they shut down Ahmad, in a way that was a deception campaign. It was close to getting discovered, It would have been, with the U.S. in Iraq, it would have been a very uncomfortable moment. They had largely finished all the work they needed to do to make the nuclear weapon itself, but they had far from having weapon-grade uranium. And so they continue the weapon-grade uranium clandestine program and kind of reduce the level of nuclear weaponization work and then start working on reducing bottlenecks. The main one was enriched uranium.
Wait, so I don't think I ever fully understood what you just said, so I'm going to repeat it back to you.
And it's
that they were,
controversial, but it's
no, but it makes sense. It makes sense that they were actually very close on the weaponization.
Yeah.
And so they shut that down because it sent a false signal, but a very convincing signal to the international community that they're not going for a bomb. Mm-hmm. And the thing that was lagging behind in their program was really the uranium enrichment. And so they hid that in plain sight. They hid some of it. They hid some of it. Hid it.
It was a highly covert program.
Highly covert program, but then they also had some of it in plain sight.
Yeah, and they were when they were caught, they had developed a strategy. They'd actually practiced it once before on it was called the Gasheen mine. They involve the Atomic Energy Organization, and then if they're caught, they say,
civil nuclear.
Civil nuclear.
Whenever they get caught, they say it's civil nuclear. Yeah. But even if it's pretty obvious that it's not. Okay, and so then the idea is that at a certain point they have all the pieces that they need to pull them together.
That's right. And I think if they're going to build an enrichment plant, they have to be very careful. I mean, there's some things that can go wrong, and you can lose a lot of centrifuges when things go wrong. So right. I think if they're going to do a kind of a breakout in the future, then I think they would want to make sure that the centrifuge plant they built, one would be smaller, probably than even Fordo, which was designed for 3,000 centrifuges. Maybe go for one that's 1,000, and that you would just live with whatever you could produce there from the 60 and possibly the residual 20 and 5% stocks that you can hide away or seize if
right.
There's nothing to stop them.
So if you can keep that facility, if you can keep that facility secret, then it's going to be smaller. So your ability to enrich quickly is going to be impaired, but you're willing to accept that impairment in the interest of secrecy.
Yeah, and then you're trying to. The Ahmad plan only sought to, in the initial phases, sought enough weapon-grade uranium for 5 nuclear weapons. They wanted more in the future, but if they can manage to get enough for 5, 6, 7 bombs, I mean that's enough, and then they can evaluate later if they can get away with building a bigger enrichment plant that would be able to go from natural up to weapon-grade uranium in a reasonable amount of time. So I think they will try to, I think, bide their time, hide their assets, deceive the IAEA, stonewall on the weaponization as they've been doing for 20 years.
Right.
But the world's changed, and so I think the
patience of the President of the United States is not what it has been in the past.
Yeah. No, and I think, 4 weeks ago, the idea that they would end enrichment was just dismissed. Iran will never agree to it. It's not credible. Let Witkoff make a compromise. Now I think it's hard to go back to where you would have anything but no enrichment. I mean, maybe there would be some really tiny little enrichment done on a very, almost a lab scale, but given all the war and Israel's demands and President Trump, is that we really are now, the realistic option is Iran has to give up its enrichment program.
So, all right.
And they'll try to prevent that, so now the ball is in the United States court to make its move of how they're going to end enrichment in Iran.
So let's go with that. Then now I won't make you the advisor to Ali Khamenei anymore. Now you're the advisor to Donald Trump. What would you tell him? What should he be demanding that would satisfy the Israelis and the rest of the world that the Iranians do not have a nuclear weapons program?
Well, I think the first thing is to think about this as what happened in 1991.
With Iraq,
history obviously doesn't repeat itself. I mean, what's the expression? It rhymes. I mean,
Yeah.
And so Iraq lost the war, and a regime was imposed on them at that time by the Security Council in a ceasefire that said that Iran had to give up all its WMD. Iraq, I'm sorry, had to give up all its WMD, and that worked. It took several years, but it nonetheless worked. And I think that's how we should think about Iran today, is this was a war, they lost the war, and that a regime would be imposed on them to give up enrichment and a nuclear weapons program.
Hard to see them agreeing to that.
Well, let me finish.
Yeah.
And that the inspection effort wouldn't be like in Iraq, which was kind of open-ended.
Yeah.
It would just be, the inspection effort would be to verify that the program, and particularly the centrifuge program, was fully dismantled and the materials accounted for, and then it would end.
Right.
And now would Iran accept this? Right now, they're making noises that no, but it may be necessary to resume the military actions, and that Israel. I wouldn't want to project what the targets would be, but Iran has to understand, or the regime, that it cannot have an enrichment program, and it can't think that this is now, we had this war and now we're going to go back and negotiate like we did for the. Like the Biden administration did on the resuming the JCPOA.
That will be their sort of their default setting, though, don't you think? Is to
No, it's very much so, and they have many allies in the West on this. But I think that the issue's fundamentally changed, and that Iran is weaker, much weaker now. It really has lost the bulk. The centrifuge program. It has these, and again, I'm not trying to trivialize by using residual, but if you looked at Natanz, if you looked at their enriched capacity before the attack, they could make 400 kilograms of 60% every year. And so they've lost this massive ability to enrich uranium. And they've lost a good portion of their program that would allow them to make a nuclear weapon. So I think they are severely set back, and I think that the challenge I see for President Trump is to turn that into actually achieving his goal of ending enrichment and doing it in a way that's verified.
So Iran doesn't even admit that there's a ceasefire. It says that what it's saying in its official statements and its media is that the United States and Israel unilaterally decided to...
Right, and Iran won.
And Iran won. So what you're saying is that what we have to have is a ceasefire negotiation.
Yeah.
And but that requires resuming the fire, really, and then saying to Iran, we will cease fire when you accept the following terms.
I don't think any realistic goal includes regime change.
Yeah.
But that's ultimately what the threat is.
Right.
If you don't accept the ceasefire arrangement, then your regime is at risk. And that's really what made Saddam Hussein change his mind about the ceasefire and then he also thought, since most of his program wasn't discovered on the nuclear weapons side, in fact on any side of WMD, that he could then hide it from the inspector. So he thought he could deceive him, but Iran's a different case. We know 95% of their program. Even on the weaponization, know a tremendous amount. Know the participants. Know the role of everyone who worked in a mod is known.
Right.
And so the program, Iran can't really hide like Saddam, and so in that sense it's much easier to eliminate. So you can better define it and then know what to look for. And of course, there's going to be issues on where's the enriched uranium.
Yeah.
But we know how much there was,
But they'll claim that. I mean, is it possible that some of it could be vaporized or dispersed in the explosions?
Sure.
So
definitely.
that's what they'll claim. Whatever the IAEA, if they were to go this route at all, and because right now they're saying we'll never talk to the IAEA, but if the IAEA inspectors were to go into Fordo, whatever they find, the Iranians will say, well, that's all we got. And if there's a discrepancy between the 400 kilograms and what's there, they'll say it got vaporized.
Yeah, no, and there'll be some very hard issues to settle, and that'll require talking to people. It'll require intelligence agencies contributing information about what could have happened. It will probably require going back somehow into Fordo, drilling back in. I mean, U.S. drills back into nuclear test sites. So nuclear explosion happens.
So we actually know how to do this.
Yeah, so you can drill back in and look and see if the kind of enriched uranium that is still inside the mountain, even if the tunnels collapsed. So I mean, but it would require a country like the United States to get involved. Certainly, the IAEA can't do it. But I think the fundamental issue is does President Trump want to do this? And it's going to require some pretty serious threats to the Iranian regime. And I think I would argue that's partly why they didn't kill Khomeini. Yeah. They could have, according to the Israelis, but they want to negotiate with an existing state.
Yeah, and they don't want chaos on the other side.
But they want this kind of deal, and we'll see if President Trump wants to do that.
Right. Well, that's very interesting. So if I were Khamenei, or let me give you a plausible scenario. I think this is the scenario you suggested, is he could do a repeat of what they did in 2003, which is proclaim that they're coming clean, or that it's over. Cut a deal with the IAEA and say you can inspect Fordo and Isfahan, Natanz, and outwardly look as if they have really that this is a kinder, gentler Islamic republic, and they're chastened on this issue. Mm-hmm. But then, meanwhile, have a clandestine program and have a small facility with the residual.
And it could be 3 years from now, 2 years. I mean, this has been going on. Their nuclear weapons program started officially in 1984. The IAEA has a document where the current supreme leader was president, orders up the creation of a nuclear weapons program. So they've accepted that they don't move quick, and they've had lots of progress, lots of setbacks. Yeah. So what's 2 or 3 years? So I guess another point is the IA can't do this. Yeah. It's really this, just like in 1991, the IA could not manage inspecting the post-war Iraq.
It can't do it because of the formidable challenge of going into sites that have been bombed,
or just overcoming Iranian resistance to telling the truth. Yeah. And fully declaring, and that they don't have the power. It requires
a state.
In 91, it was the entire Security Council, right. And now it would have to be the United States, backed up by Israeli capabilities.
What is the role?
But I think that the G7 just issued a statement today. I think.
No enrichment.
Well, it wasn't. It was sort of it shouldn't have unnecessary enrichment. So it's a compromise statement, but that's a lot further along than they've ever come before. And there is no necessary enrichment in Iran. Right.
How do you envision the role of the IAEA here? What would you, let me put it to you this way. Your non-proliferation is your life's work. And in enhancing the role of the IAEA is something that you support, I presume. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What would you like to see the IAEA do? Let's say the United States comes in and puts pressure on the Iranians. What can the IAEA do that will be beneficial to everyone?
Well, I think they can do the verification. You don't have to create a special inspection force that was done in 1991. That's what I participated in, was the inspection force created by the Security Council resolution. It reported to the Director General of the IAEA, but it had nothing to do with the safeguards, the normal inspection process of the agency. So it was a specially empowered group with tremendous authorities, and backed up by the P5. And the U.S. did bomb if Iran was uncooperative, and the inspectors were dogged. And finally, a defector comes out, or 2 defectors, and all of the entire nuclear weapons program is exposed. I should say even more than 2, several defectors came out and unraveled the secrecy Saddam was trying to wrap around his program. And so, but I think in this case, the IAEA Safeguards Department could do the job to verify the ending of the centrifuge program.
Now, they have never certified Iran's program as peaceful.
Right.
And that's what we're waiting for, right? Is for the IAEA. That's what we would all like to see. Is the IAEA says they have answered all of the outstanding questions, and we certify it as.
Yeah. And the IAEA would still need to do that job, but I think that and this, if you had a ceasefire deal that required end of enrichment, you would also have in there the end of the weaponization program, but that's going to be tougher and take longer, because it's more dispersed. It's harder to get Iran to cooperate on that, but and harder to verify. But that would also have to be a mission. But if you gain confidence they have no enrichment program, don't have stocks of enriched uranium, don't have hidden away, a couple thousand centrifuges, or let's just say more than 1,000, then the focus on the weaponization is less urgent. Still needs to happen.
Can you explain Rafael Grossi to me? He's made a number of statements in the lead up to this conflict and during it that I haven't completely understood. Some of them seem to work against what Donald Trump is trying to do. I presume that there's an institutional reason why he's making these statements.
Well, I think the one that's most notable is the one over the weekend when he said that within a few months Iran could, it was a very odd statement, in a few centrifuge cascades or less, they could start enriching uranium. And the way I interpret that was that he's doing kind of hyping of the threat in order to bolster support for them to get back into Iran. It's not an uncommon tactic.
We're needed here.
Yeah.
But the other thing he did was...
But I would say it's not helpful because it would be nice not to have war resume while you're trying to start a serious negotiation to end the enrichment program. Yeah. I think the reaction that I saw out of Israel to that statement is, well, we'll just start bombing again. And so he's thinking it's helping him get inspectors in, but it's also increasing the chance that war will break out. In fact, I would say all these worst case assessments people make now, they're often made by the leftist, the more left-leaning groups. They're determined now to build the bomb. They were going to crash on it. It's kind of ironic. They're increasing the chance of war by making those statements when it's certainly not in their interest. And ironically, Trump saying everything's obliterated reduces the chance of war resuming in the near term. So it rolls from, and this would remind me of 2002, where the left groups are acting like the Bush administration, hyping the nuclear threat, and Trump is acting like the sort of anti-war people who are saying no, it's obliterated.
If you follow any of these issues long enough, everyone flips on it. Yeah. The other statement that Grossi made that I didn't understand is he said that there was no evidence that Iran was moving toward a bomb, and I didn't understand why he made that statement.
That was not. He spoke in a long paragraph, and I when I saw that I thought, no, he never said that.
Oh, really?
And what it is that the sentence is true, but it's embedded in a whole long paragraph that wanders a little bit.
Oh, so they tweezered out a little phrase and then build more on it.
And what he was talking about was, the meaning was clear in the paragraph that, they basically what he was saying is we really caught them just dead right on, they've got undeclared nuclear material. How did he put it? We are inspectors. We have a job to do using tools that require concrete evidence that are gained through the inspection effort. And we've proven this. Now, the situation was complicated because the Iranians were talking about building nuclear weapons. There was a debate how long it would take Iran to build nuclear weapons. Some were saying a few months, some were saying a year. I think the year is exaggerated. And so all this was in this paragraph. And then he said, we don't have concrete evidence of a nuclear weapons program, but what he was meaning is that's not where we're at. We don't have those tools to determine that.
Oh.
So it was a very different meaning.
Okay.
That was,
Always dangerous to read the news report rather than the actual.
And we put up the
transcript.
whole statement, and I think people got a very different impression. And it's a good expression, tweezered out some one-liner, and and they frankly, what he was also implying was that they, for 20 years, have been trying to get Iran to admit to its secret nuclear weapons program of the early 2000s. If they would admit to it, then Iran, they could move on to see what remains of it. Is it ongoing? Where are the things that were in that program?
Yeah.
And that Iran has just refused. And so in 2011, the IAEA issued a report. It had internal reports that were more thorough, laying out all that they knew about Iran's nuclear weapons program, down to how long it would take them to finish a device. They said Iran knows how to do it, and then how long it may take them to put it on a ballistic missile. So they've always had the position that Iran had a nuclear weapons program, but they need Iran to admit it, and then they need to verify it before they would actually say something official about the program's existence or its elimination.
So you're telling me that there's not a fatwa against nuclear weapons from the.
Well, I can't help but think that fatwa came up when they were knocking down Ahmad, hiding from inspectors, keeping Fordo running, continuing to work on nuclear weapons problems after Ahmad was shut down.
Yeah.
And but I think recent the religious authorities in Iran have made it clear that could change.
Yeah.
It could turn on a dime and it's gone.
Yeah, it means nothing. Yeah.
And many Muslim states do have nuclear weapons.
And they were clearly building one. I mean,
I'm sorry?
The Iranians were building one.
Yeah.
So it's not I just find it funny when Americans say they won't build one because there's a fatwa. And
and this is a country.
President Obama, in his 2013 UN General Assembly speech, said, we should be happy because there's a fatwa.
No, that's right. And this is a country that, also has a chemical weapons program and, slaughters people and beats up teenage girls for what they put on their head. And so, I mean, it's not a moral leadership at all. So that somehow we should take that proclamation as meaning anything is just self-deception.
Yeah, self-deception. Well, I think that all the big questions I had have been answered really clearly. Is there something I should have asked you that I haven't asked you?
No, I think I would just like to emphasize that there is a tremendous opportunity now to try to end enrichment in Iran, and also I think this is painful, but for many to look at. But in a way, Israel was doing the dirty work of the international community, and I have to use that phrase very carefully because it can be misinterpreted. But
how about this? It was doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah, heavy lifting to enforce the Non-proliferation Treaty, and that's not going to be accepted. But in a way, that's what they were doing. I don't think that's why they struck out of existential reasons. They felt that this has reached a point where their very existence could be threatened in the near future if they didn't act. But I think they ended up enforcing the non-proliferation regime at a time when it's literally falling apart. So it is an opportunity here to build from this to make the regime stronger.
All right, the regime, you mean the non-proliferation regime,
yeah.
Not the Islamic Republic.
No, that's right, the non-proliferation regime.
All right, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Sure, thank you.